It's On The Bench. If you don't know what On The Bench is, it's a series that we do here at GCM just to talk about stuff that we're actually building, things that we're working on, what it is that is on the bench. So you're welcome to join the series. You can take a look at the whole playlist on our YouTube channel and check out all the other stuff we've done on the bench. Today we're actually going to do sort of a fast forward version of me rebuilding this 49 Chevy. This truck has a long history. You can check in the YouTube description box to get the links for the other videos that have been we've done with this truck. It's the prototype C-Max. Dana and I both built one. I built this 49 Chevy on our very first C-Max prototype, and Dana built his Orange Crush Hilux build onto the same exact chassis. Two different body setups, two different axle setups. It's really fun to watch those two come together very differently. And I've had a catastrophic transmission failure with mine. This one is originally used the RC four-wheel drive version of the transmission. This was the R4 scale transmission that RC four-wheel drive made years ago, and finally I actually had a gear slash bearing slash kind of shaft failure on it after all these years of driving it. And what ended up happening is there's the mess. The gear, the bearing that used to be here, for whatever reason wasn't doing its job. Created an awful lot of metal. You can see that this gear was actually dropping down, grinding away in the case, and I think it's actually on top in the transmission, and just kind of made a mess of the teeth. Eventually it stopped moving, and so had a catastrophic failure. That being the prototype, I'm not ashamed, and it was the high gear ratio RC four-wheel drive R4 transmission, so we're actually going to replace it with a GCM transmission. This is our low range LRT, and we're going to put all of the drop transfer case with overdrive back on it, and it's going to be a fun build, rebuild. So we're just going to kind of speed through this here. You can enjoy the tunes and watch along, and at the end I'll make some comments about kind of how the install went and what happened. A couple things to mention here while I'm putting this back together. None of this stuff is the same, right? So all the RC four-wheel drive transmission stuff is entirely and completely different than the GCM transmission. This question has come up a bunch of times on the customer support email, on Facebook, on pretty much all the social media. At some point somebody has asked this question. You know, what's the difference? Why are these not the same? I thought they were all the same thing. They're not the same. They look the same. Nothing is the same inside. They mount on the same motor plate. Ours is compatible with the R4. Ours also fits, obviously, ours. Our motor plate also fits the original SSD scale transmission. Absolutely nothing else is the same. Nothing else is the same. So I've tried, I even tried on this rebuild here, I tried to reuse the pinion gear that I got with the original R4 transmission, and I couldn't even reuse the original pinion gear. Literally everything is different. So this is the first gear, basically this is the spur that sits in the motor plate, and then this goes into the transmission housing to start driving all the gear train. And that gear is not the same. Even the pinion gear has to be replaced between the R4 and the GCM. And of course, the good news is both transmissions have the appropriate pinion gear included with them, so it doesn't really matter what truck you're building. If you use a GCM scale transmission or the RC four-wheel drive R4, you're still going to get all the parts that you need, but they don't cross over at all. So that's really important to note when you're trying to put these together. Now, the good news is that even though I have this old prototype two bolt motor plate in here, this is the original C-Max design from the prototyping, which we now no longer use. You guys know that already. We moved the position of the motor plate and all kinds of other stuff. But this one here will still fit on the GCM transmission, so because of that, I'm good to go. It was nice to take it all apart and actually see inside of it, because even though it was gross and stuff, it was kind of dirty and gross inside. There was lots of water. This thing's been through water a lot. It's been through lots of mud. There's a significant amount of wheel time on this chassis, and it's been through tons of sand, all those kinds of things. I didn't even have the holes plugged on the back of the transfer case, which is a big no-no, but that obviously got forgotten. These 4 holes right here are not being used for mounting on the back of the LRT2, and those 4 holes were still open, so that accounted for why there was so much mud and junk and dirt inside the transfer case here. Another thing to mention, I've had to add this bracket on here that has the 2 top holes, because the RC four-wheel drive transmission that was in here has the top holes on it. It's also taller here than a GCM transmission. None of the stuff here actually fits on a GCM transmission, just so you all know that ahead of time. But these 2 holes in the original prototype that I made for C-Max, I used these 2 holes for a top-mounted cross member. And so I've had to recreate those holes, but because the GCM transmission is actually smaller in the back than the RC four-wheel drive, I could put this little tab over top of it. You see how it kind of goes all the way around the tailstock there? That allowed me to put a couple of threads in there. So my cross member for the prototype is right here, and now I can actually just use the 2 mounting holes on top to fix the cross member to it. It goes on like this somehow, like that. So anyway, that's where I'm at. We're going to see if we can get this thing stuck in there now. It's in. That's pretty amazing. Peekaboo. So I managed, you can see how I needed the bolts on top there, eh? But anyway, that's in. The bolts on the bell housing were a super big pain in the rear because the motor's still on it and all that. But that's in, which is just incredible. Like, I couldn't be happier. I wasn't really sure how that was going to go together, but it went really well. Better than I thought. Yeah. So, exhaust still in one place. Everything's kind of back together. I'm going to finish up the drive shafts and get all that done. Amazing. Pretty happy. So I can't go any farther than this actually, because found out that my dashboard here is held on to the side plates with little round 1/4 inch magnets, one on each side, so the dash can be taken out for servicing or fixing or whatever. And this one on this side here was actually broken off. The joint, the magnet was off the styrene. So I'm going to tape that up and just leave it. That kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like together. It's very, very simple. The main interior tray actually sits on the sliders with magnets. You can see that there's magnets on the floorboards. See those magnets there? They're touching the metal slider bars. So the interior tray, this whole thing here is glued onto that piece which has the magnets on the bottom. Let's see if I can show you here. See that? There's magnets on the bottom there. And then the interior tray here goes in as well and also has magnets on it. So they all just sort of clip together. And then this piece can easily be taken out to be detailed and all that stuff, and it's great. Doesn't affect the back at all. This was all done with lined styrene and 3D print of a couple different varieties. So there we go. That's about as far as I can get to on the bench today. I'm going to let this thing set up here, and then I'll have my joint fixed on that dashboard problem. So thanks for watching On the Bench. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.